Campaign strategy, turning a strength into weakness. This is a strategy that we've seen before, and I just wanted to highlight two. So Ed Markey's campaign, he turned Joe Kennedy's family legacy into a weakness, which is something that everybody thought it was a strength. When it first started, Joe Kennedy was way ahead. I'm just going to read a quick quote that I got from The Intercept. There were clear signs that Kennedy's campaign was growing more desperate in the final month of the race. While he had spent most of his political career trying to prove that he was more than just a guy who coasted to power on his family's surname, leading up to the election, he regularly invoked his family's political legacy and reminded Massachusetts voters of his beloved heritage.
Actually, that was actually a brilliant strategy on Markey's behalf. And it's interesting because somehow, so we're familiar with the dynasties of Bush, for example. Nothing good ever came out of that. Clinton, for another example. Nothing good ever came out of that. The Cheneys, another example. But Kennedy is in a weird situation where it's almost like he has a half and half, right? You don't know where they could fall until they're well into their career. Kennedy, JFK, literally shifted mid-presidency. RFK was assassinated, and people largely believe it's because of how progressive he was. RFK Jr. was at Standing Rock, which is Joe Kennedy's first cousin. RFK Jr. is at Standing Rock. And Joe Kennedy, we actually don't know which side of the fence he was going to end up falling on, because from policy, like I say, he co-sponsored the Green New Deal. He was the first one to co-sponsor it for AOC. He's always supported Medicare for all since he's been in the House of Representatives since 2013. He also voted against Barack Obama, not only Trump's military budgets, but Barack Obama's military budget. So he's been very decent on foreign policy. And yet, because Kennedy did not, whenever Markey implemented that strategy, which I don't think that he was expecting to work all that well, they didn't prepare a counter strategy for that. Yeah. Which is, you have to be willing to embrace your family name and be willing to say, so just like my grandfather who passed, I believe in universal health care. Just like my brother or my cousin who was at Standing Rock, was at all these places and is a champion on all these issues that progressives care about. I believe in civil liberties and the rights of indigenous Americans and the policies to push those issues through. And you have to take that and be like, no. I don't know what he thinks is a Kennedy name, what the Kennedy name means, but I can tell you all the Kennedys that that you're familiar with because of all the great things that they have done. That is the Kennedy legacy. And that's what he should have done and embraced that. And then, of course, shifted to policy supporting that stuff. But they didn't do that. And Markey took advantage of it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when it came to the Kennedy legacy versus Ed Markey, I think that especially when you're running as a progressive, it's always difficult to know where to position yourself when you're running against another Democrat, which is something that a lot of progressives do. It's always becomes this sort of policy differential. And I think that there was a lot that Ed Markey had stood on with the Green New Deal. I think that it became difficult for Joe Kennedy to really cement himself as having said, especially because we had talked about this before, but like Ed Markey had a lot of cosigns from a lot of different progressives. I think he got Elizabeth Warren's endorsement as well. Yeah. I know that Ed Markey did have a lot of important progressive cosigns that, helped carry water for his candidacy. And I don't think Joe Kennedy had that same sort of lineup of people saying, well, I'll sign off on his progressive credentials.
Gotcha. So I'll jump in here real quick. So as I saw that one of the reasons that Nancy said she got into the race was because of the way Ed Markey was besmirching the Kennedy name, which that was pretty laughable to me, but I think it was just a reason for her. She wanted to jump in the race regardless, but it really shows you how he did a great job. Whether you like Markey or not, he was able to use that strategy. There's always that strategy that usually you see Republicans use that against Democrats, where they'll take a strength, which is like Kerry back when he ran against Bush. They took the fact that he was in the army, or he was a serviceman, and they flipped that and made it a negative by swift boating him. So we see this as an example, whether you like Markey or not, that he was able to flip Joe Kennedy's last name in Massachusetts. It made him the first Kennedy to lose ever in their history.